Hey, you're listening to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health.
I'm your co-host, Mark.
I'm one of your co-hosts, Billy.
I'm your last co-host, Josh, and today we are jumping into Salem-horror-fest 2024 for the first time in 3 years. And over 100 episodes later, we return to the spooky town of Salem.
How did we miss last year and the year before?
I applied last year, and because I was in the middle of email transitions, moving all of my contacts over to the victims and villains one, I didn't actually hear anything back. So here we are.
And I'm not special enough to have a victims and villains email. I see how it is.
I'll get there soon.
It's a race, you know. It's a race now. So we've got a lot of titles to get through for you guys. Some of them we have overlaps on. Some of them we watched solely by ourselves. Mark and I are going to kick it off with a blast from Genre Blast last year. Mark watched Live Screamers. Mark, what did you think?
So it's one of those movies that follows that trend of, what was it, Host a couple years back, that kind of came out with the pandemic and everybody trying to find new ways of doing movies without actually being in the same room with each other, kind of thing. Although they were in the same room in this movie. It's a bunch of streamers essentially reviewing a video game, and as the story progresses, they're all being killed in the game and in real life. That's the story. That's actually the synopsis. So the main portion of the screen is the video game, while you've got little pop-up screens of the different players and streamers. It's not quite, it almost feels like a subgenre of found footage with the way it does. I mean, it was fun. It was a little slow in the beginning, but once it kind of kicked off after about the first 15 minutes and started kind of feeling what was going on, it ended up, it was a pretty fun movie.
So it was one of my favorite horror films of last year. I really dug it. And just to kind of give you a precursor, I've seen this is a sequel to 2018's Live Scream, which is essentially, it's about a 65-minute movie. This one's a little bit longer. Basically, it's one guy and same premise kind of happens, and they kind of build on that mythology, but everything in terms of video games that you're seeing is actually created specifically for this movie. Everything was, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a long time gamer, and there's nothing about the game that looks like anything I've ever seen. Oh, well, that I've played or seen as a title. I have seen that style game before. Just not this looks like it was made for the movie kind of thing.
I think one of the things that got me about the reasons why I ended up liking it so much was because I'm not a gamer. And maybe this is kind of where it loses. I have the advantage and you don't. I am not a gamer by any means. I've tried watching streaming from like other players and going through, horror games like Resident Evil, Dead by Daylight. And it's never been something that I've enjoyed, but I've loved the way that Michelle, really the writer director, really lays out a lot of the stories and kind of pairs that with the drama, but also at the same time gives you the ability to kind of see this like really twisty turny kind of unique for the horror experience as well.
I mean, I talk to a lot of streamers, but not of the video game genre, of the painting and miniature painters and stuff like that, competition painters. We've had Zambies on the show a couple times, and she's one of those streamers. Actually, before we started recording today, I was talking to her about a competition piece I'm getting ready to start on. But anyway, yeah, it's neat the way they kind of combine the two the streaming and the horror video game and kind of turned it into a horror movie like this.
I'm a little bit more analytical than you, as we've established over 100 episodes. One of the things that I really appreciate about this, I don't know if you're touching on this, but I love the way that this really uses things like addressing females in minorities in the scope of the world of streaming, and how this film comments on race, transphobia, homophobia, misgendering, a lot of the other things. I thought this film was really smart, and it's really entertaining also at the same time.
I mean, yeah, the way they talk about some of the characters, like what they say, you're just here for tits and ass or something like that, was one of the comments they make in the movie to one of the girls. And like I mentioned, Zambi, she was actually told by some other painters in miniatures that she was ruining this ruining the hobby because she was a girl. And yeah. Oh yeah. Ask her about it next time we were on. Ask her about it next time she's on the show. So you see it a lot, but you also see a lot of them leaning into it, because you've got like some streamers that's what they lean into on Twitch, and they make God knows how much money. Just leaning into the stereotype. But then you have some that are like legit. I play games, I'm a legit streamer, and things like that have to kind of break that stereotype and get out of that stereotype. And it makes it difficult for them to get through what they want to get through and do what they want to do.
Yeah, I think this movie is really smart in that way, the way that it comments on it. And again, I have a lot of the advantage of being ignorant of this world, and getting to kind of talk to Michelle last year, Genre Blast. She had talked about from the first film to this film about how she had actually started streaming and like got into gaming specifically as research on how to make this movie more authentic, and how to really kind of also commentate on how non-white dudes are treated in that game sphere, that world. And I think this movie captures it really well.
I mean, again, I don't watch a lot of the streamers that do the video game stuff. So, but the ones I watch that do the hobby stuff that I do and competition baiting, there's a few of them I watch that are of various minority groups, and you really don't see it. I haven't really seen that too much in those streams, but it could also be a difference in communities too. You have the different types of communities, and some can be bigger assholes than others.
Absolutely, 100%. All right, well, what would you rate this on the Rorschach rating scale?
Probably my general 3.5 out of 5. It's better than average, but it's not great. So It was entertaining. I may or may not watch live stream. I don't know. If I come across it and have nothing else in mind, I might watch it. But
I highly recommend both of these, and you guys can check out my full thoughts from last year's Genre Blast, but I ended up giving this movie a 4.5. I really, really loved this movie. It surprised the shit out of me, is what I will say.
I mean, I had a little bit of issues with some of the dialogue and acting was a little cheesy. That was my biggest complaint. But overall, it was entertaining. I might not necessarily seek it out in the future unless nothing else is on.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, Billy, we're going to you. What's first up on your watch list?
I'm going to start with It Doesn't Get Any Better Than This. The title says it all. So this is one that it's almost like a found footage kind of Blair Witchy feel to it. And it's a documentary about a 20-year-old friendship turns turns into a horror movie kind of deal. They purchase a house. That's basically the synopsis of it. If you didn't know the synopsis of what's going on, you probably wouldn't be able to get the full story out of it. It's kind of confusing. They don't really use too many special effects in it or anything like that. It does hit the documentary feel. They've got that 100%, and that going through it, the acting doesn't really feel as forced as what you see in a lot of the found footage documentary kind of feel to it. But like I said, the storyline was jumpy and kind of cluttered to me, and the film doesn't seem like it progressed. It was like slow the whole time. So, it didn't really reach oh my God, I've reached the top. Here we go. It just the whole way through to the movie was slow to me.
Is there like no payoff in this movie to warrant the slow pace?
It doesn't feel like it. No, not really. And I'll be honest, I had one of my kids watching it with me, and without saying a word to him, he said exactly what I just said. Like no payoff. It was really slow. He literally said, what was the point of the movie? But I try to be neutral because it is a documentary, kind of a documentary feel. I know he doesn't like those styles, but this is one, if I gave it a rating, it'd be like I hate to say a 2, but it'd be a 2.
Well, I'll think you won just a little bit slower than that. And so the first one that is up on my list, I've shared my full thoughts over on our YouTube, as I have with a lot of these, but go check it out. It's youtube.com/victims and villains. The first one that I have is called Young Blondes Stalked and Murdered. And the idea of this film is that it's a brisk 65 minutes. It tells the story of a aspiring actress that goes to great lengths to kind of nail the good role, essentially. And there's a part in this movie that, like, the best way that I can explain it is there's a part in this movie where our lead actress goes to watch a movie, and she walks out of the theater, and the person in the universe that she goes with asks, what did you think of this movie? And she was like, it was kind of slow, and it was kind of boring. And I could not have like summed up my feelings on this movie in any other way. This movie somewhat stylistically reminds me of Looky Loo, which was a Horrific Hope official selection this year. And there's like the good, like the best thing about this movie is how beautiful it looks, but also at the same time, just how just the ending, just the way that this one ends, it builds and has a good time, but overall it sucked. So I will see your 2, and I will give Young Blondes Stalked and Murdered a 1 out of 5.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please If you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Mark, what do you got? What do you got next for us?
What do I got next? Black Lake director's cut. So, have you seen it? I thought I remember you saying you had seen it in the past, or you could see it, or something.
I have not seen it, but out of every film that was playing this year, this one seems the most accessible because it is a director's cut of a recognizable film. So there are chances that it might not be the director's cut, but there are chances that this could actually be streaming on somewhere like Tubi or Pluto.
Okay. So the quick little story of it, a painter, Araya, however you said her name in the movie, was given a scarf by her aunt from Pakistan, and she starts getting haunted by some South Asian witch that I cannot pronounce the name of. I think it's Shirael, I think is how it's pronounced, while she's in Scotland trying to kind of get her shit together and paint. So that's a short version of it. It was a little confusing in the way that it mixes kind of art house style scenes in with the story. Does that make sense? So you've got like story scenes where they're telling, like, she's talking to her aunt or something, and then they'll go in to these like flashy scenes, like the art and some of the scenery of the area and this and that. And it kind of goes back and forth between the two. So I found it a little bit confusing. And it kind of made it feel like it drug and just was longer than it needed to be.
Because this movie, if I remember correctly, it's not American, correct?
I don't think so. Like she goes to Scotland. She's of, I think, Pakistan descent, and because her aunt's Pakistani, and I think the ghost or witch or whatever it is like Indian or something. I may be wrong, and if I am, I'm sorry, but I don't think it was American at all.
This is South American, according to Google.
South Asian. Sorry, South Asian.
Yeah. The witch in this is a demonic and malevolent South Asian witch.
Yeah, that's what I meant. South Asian.
All right. So, what would this give you, score-wise? What would you give this one?
It wasn't my cup of tea. Probably a 1 out of 5.
All right, keeping that one train going.
It's the fact that, to me, again, it may just not have been my type of movie, which is very possible. It felt like it was dragging on more and more. And the farther you got in the movie, it was like, okay, is it getting rid? Oh no, it's still going.
If I could, just kind of summing up listening to you, do you find that this movie was more style over substance, where like it went for those more artistic decisions rather than narrative focus?
I can't tell if they were trying to focus on art or on narrative, because it went back and forth between the two.
That's fair.
It wasn't like kind of blended together smoothly. It would just kind of, you'd go from talking on the phone with the aunt to her painting and flashing into all kinds of different shots and this and that, and then back to just some normal everyday thing again. And it just kind of kept jumping back and forth instead of smooth transitions, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated by filmmakers that decide to tell stories through multiple different periods of time, and stylistically there are some that do kind of tie everything together in the end, and then there are some that don't and decide not to kind of make that so.
Yeah, and again, it could have been just me, because there's some. What was that one last year? Skinamarink. Oh God, there's people that absolutely love that movie,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
I feel like it was a complete waste of 2 hours. So it may just have been a movie that's just not my style.
All right, Billy, what do you got next for us, my guy?
Okay, we'll go with Purgatory-Jack. The synopsis on it was basically a neo-neuro mystery thriller kind of film that deals with the afterlife, where a punk star tried to commit suicide, and she's stuck in the in-between while her life is being decided on what's going to happen, of going back or going to wherever she's going.
What'd you call it? A neo what?
Nero is how they put it. That's in the synopsis.
Noir.
Noir. Thank you.
Yeah,
Hey,
Neo, sorry,
correct. I was
Neo
like,
Noir.
what? Fix it. Thank you. Neo noir mystery. So I actually kind of like this one. The storyline was more clear on this one. It, concise. It had more of a payoff to it. It had more of a, you could follow it. You could guess some of the stuff was going on. I mean, it's a typical movie of, afterlife, what's happening, what's going to happen. The acting wasn't really that bad. It had different genres or different, for instance, one person seemed like they were from the 20s, where another person seemed like they were from the 80s. And so you had all the different eras mixed in a little bit. The cons on this one was kind of like the coloring they used through the movie. It made it like a dirty feel. I know it was on purpose, but at the same time, it took away from it. It had like a yellow tint the whole time. And the lighting on it, sometimes where they were shooting it, you couldn't even see what was on the screen. It was kind of light straight at the camera. And then, they had a couple fight scenes on there where it was, unless they did this on purpose, you could see where the person was acting like they were punching. It completely missed. Like wasn't even near who they were supposed to hit.
Like old school choreography.
Like old, yeah. And then the special effects, the green screen, there were some things that were completely off, like a car driving straight and the background's going sideways. So, I mean, but for the story and all itself, I liked the movie. If they could fix that stuff, it'd be even higher. But I thought it was like a 3 on this one, 3.5.
I feel like this is just me, but like I typically, when I'm looking at like smaller budget films like this, I typically give a pass when it comes to like CGI issues. Unless you're Velocipaster.
Because I give Deathgasm a solid 5 every time, and it was low budget and cheesy as hell.
Yeah,
I would have gave it a pass, but they had like 3 or 4 green screen things, and the other ones they got running great. In this one scene, just this one green screen where they're driving down the road and the trees are going like they're drifting, like it's going sideways instead of like you're driving straight.
that's
almost
fair.
like you're drifting. So, other than that, I would have gave it a pass on that.
Well,
yeah. I think on stuff like that with the indie movies and lower budget movies, you kind of do have to give it a little bit of leeway.
Yeah.
Until it hits a certain point of cheese, and then you have to figure out, was it intentional, or was it that they did the best they could with the budget that they had?
Yeah.
I don't think the scene I'm talking about, I really don't think it was intentional.
Because go watch Lamageddon or Velocipaster. Those are cheesy for the sake of being cheesy. It was planned to be that way.
And there are definitely, like Echo Mark's point, there are definitely movies that are made
right
with the intent to purposely be bad and schlocky, because the filmmakers grew up on films like Tromeo and Juliet or Frankenhooker or Toxic Avenger movies that are just over the top and just absolutely utterly insane, and they want to replicate that because that's what got them into filmmaking in the first place.
Yeah, and it could be that some of it was a nod to that, but like I said, just whenever all the other green screens were right, and then that one just completely that threw the whole thing off to me. But other than that, I mean, I love the movie. I'd watch it again.
All right. Well, I will keep this love fest strong. Next one I got is called Faceless After Death. And this isn't it. This again is about an actress. This is so for all you Terrifier fans out there, this stars Jenna Carnell. I think I said that name right. She co-wrote this film. She produced it. She stars in it. She's fantastic in this movie. This movie tells the story of a actress that essentially gets typecast as a final girl and is essentially trying to break that typecast and somehow ends up getting into making her own movies. That's what I will say. It's spoiler free. This movie's a lot of fun. If you're a fan of slasher films, this movie is a lot of fun. It's really inventive with the deaths. It's got some comedy that's in it. It's bookended beautifully with just a really rich color palette of reds and blues and purples, and it kind of weaves a lot of that color in and out of the story. And it actually ends up also being a reflection of Jenna's character's kind of mental state throughout the course of the film. It's a lot of fun. Again, full thoughts are on YouTube. Mark, I give this one 4 out of 5. What do you got for us next?
What do I got next? Sins of the Father.
Yes, sir.
Okay, where do I even begin with this one?
Start with the synopsis.
Yeah.
So, after the death of his father, Aiden and his mother, Sarah, find themselves responsible for the sale of his family house, or family home, a place they thought they'd left behind. The task seems almost manageable when Sarah's friends arrive to help. As they clear out the house, they uncover sinister secrets from the family's past, a family who is not so eager to let the sins of the past go unpunished. So, yeah. I hate to my issue with some of these festivals sometimes is I feel like I'm just an asshole. Because it felt like they watched Midsummer and then tried to adapt it to a low budget movie. You kind of saw what was coming from the beginning. Once it all starts happening and you start kind of hearing people bitch about certain things in the movie and the way it opens up, you see what's coming. And it's that whole concept of the village in Midsummer still practicing old Nordic traditions. Yeah. And rituals. It's a very similar story. The area around the house and farm that they're trying to clear out to sell. And you end up with a whole lot of the movie is just people bitching. And I wasn't overly fond of it. It's like I saw what they were going for, but to me, it almost felt like somebody was trying to write the movie of what they remember being told Midsummer was.
That sucks. I'm so sorry.
Oh man.
It was, and it just, the more I watched, it was like, that's really what this seems like. And I got the concept of the movie. I liked the background that they were going for and what they were going for with it. It just seemed like some of the choices were a bit off with the overall story and how it played out. Like if they had all the friends and less bitching and fighting, it might have been more enjoyable. But if I want to see that, I'd go to a family reunion. It's
That's terrible.
I mean, it's like that's. Oh, I mean, it was okay. I might give it a 2.5 at best, but it was one of those movies where there really didn't seem to be a likable character in the bunch, and you couldn't relate to anybody or anything.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say I am gonna screw up the rotation here, Billy. I'm gonna jump in front of you real quick.
Okay.
And because my last movie is called Sweet Relief. And it's
shitty too.
It's a lot like what you're talking about. So this movie tells the story of a small town that gets overtaken by this internet challenge where you essentially have to kill or be killed. Like that's kind of like boiling it down. And this movie had so many like different like plot lines, and I could see where they're going for, and I had a love-hate relationship because I feel like this movie did a lot of good things, and then it did a lot of really just made poor decisions in terms of its narrative. Like the pacing was kind of all over the place. There's too many storylines going on at one point. Like none of the characters felt developed, but then like you flip it over and it feels like really claustrophobic. Like having lived in a small town, they got that feeling perfect. But also at the same time, like I also think that this did a good job at kind of addressing kind of like internet phenomenons and challenges and how people kind of do them without being always the most intelligent, or because we're trying to always go viral. I think it has a really great commentary in that fact, but it's really muddled by a lot of the things that like sounds like Sins of the Father also kind of addressed.
I mean, isn't that kind of like the basis for, was it Truth or Dare or Nerve?
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
I mean, so to me, like coming up with those movies, I think Truth or Dare just like didn't have any interesting characters. Like this one had a lot of characters, but they were quirky and they were entertaining. And so there were things that I liked about this movie, but out of all 4 of the films we're talking about here today, this is the one that I had the most love-hate for. Like,
I mean, even the worst movie, if it's got some decent characters, you can get past a lot.
Yeah. So I gave this one a 2.5 out of 5. You guys can also check it out on for YouTube. And then there was Billy with Billy's last one. What do you got for us?
I got the-vizitant, which is a mysterious entity that offers a brilliant defeated politician the power to change the world.
I think that's why I didn't request this movie, is because I didn't want to deal with any politician or politics in my movies.
I'm going to be honest. I actually like this movie, and I'm not giving anything away because their names are literally Jekyll and Hyde in the movie, and that's the feel it's got to it. It's like Jekyll and Hyde to the whole thing. The way it's shot and everything is kind of like a 30, 40-ish 30s and 40s, even though it's recent. It's the way that they portrayed the colors and everything in the filming was like a black gray, and the way that they did the special effects was the older style. The story was entertaining and clear. Like I said, I like the special effects. I actually like this movie. This is one I would go back and watch again with no issues. I think they could actually build off of it and make, more and actually keep going with what they did.
That's awesome. What would you get? What would you rate this one?
I actually gave this one a 4.
All right. Billy and I both got a 4. Mark chose all the duds.
Yeah.
Well, I did have the 3.5.
You did. That's correct. And we all got to watch a little movie called Sigil, which is the only overlap that we have this year outside of live screamers. Mark, what's this movie about?
2 girls unknowingly conjure a witch while celebrating their anniversary in the countryside.
How does everyone feel about this movie?
There were aspects of it that annoyed the crap out of me.
Such as?
The constant, are you taking your meds? Did you take your meds? Are you taking your meds? Did you take your meds today? Are you sure you took your meds? The entire friggin' movie, like every 10 minutes, did you take your meds? Are you sure you took your meds?
So the exposition feels a little heavy-handed.
It felt overplayed in a manner to make one character like they were trying to, okay, she's crazy, right? She's got issues.
Yeah.
It felt like they were trying way too hard to let you know the one girl has issues.
That's fair.
And I also kind of felt like there are a couple nudity scenes that just felt like they were there for the sake of being there.
That's also fair. Billy, what did you think about this movie?
I mean, I agree. There were some scenes in there that were just, they were there to be there. Or if they weren't there, it wouldn't have made a difference. I mean, I like them
kind of like Indiana Jones and the what was it, the Lost Ark. But everything would have still happened the same without him.
I mean, I kind of like the movie. There were some parts where you're questioning, okay, is this real? Is this fake? If you didn't know the story, the synopsis, you would be saying, all right, where is this movie? Going back to the crazy part, he said, is she crazy? Is she not? But it's one of those that if you've seen one witch movie, you've seen them all. And this kind of fits into me to where, you're trying to appease her basically by conjuring her without giving anything away.
So I agree with Mark. I think there are portions of exposition that are way too heavy in this movie. And I also agree with you, Billy. I think that this movie could, had it not been for the exposition issues, could have been a really awesome witchcraft movie. I really like the way that they built up and kind of made the witch mysterious, and you never really saw her face, and she was hidden in shadows and blurred. And I thought that aspect of the film was handled really well. This movie looks absolutely gorgeous. I'm a huge sucker for some beautiful cinematography, and this film has it in spades. There's a lot of really warm, muted colors in here. It's really, really well done. Acting overall I thought was really well done. But does anyone else think that this movie just felt too long?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
yes.
I like the special effects and all too, but I mean, this movie itself felt like it dragged at some points to where they could have made it shorter versus, like you're saying, it was just too long and they drew it out longer than it needed to be.
It kind of felt like they took this concept of, is the witch real? Is the witch not real? And they could have taken it and asked that question, but because, to go back to Mark's original point of how heavy-handed the exposition in this movie feels, you as the audience don't get the choice to kind of make that decision up for yourself. It's kind of by the time the quote-unquote big reveal happens, you're already force fed kind of how the director, the filmmakers want you to see these characters and see this movie. And that was my largest problem with this movie, is that there are a multitude of scenes that you could erase from here or alter or make shorter, and honestly could have been way better. This movie has a very slow pace and not a tremendous payoff. That I think is probably my biggest issues with this movie.
Yeah, and it feels like they went for almost two endings or two stories, but couldn't make up their mind which one they wanted to go with.
Right. Because that ending could have been changed very easily to make it the opposite of what it is. So yes, I agree 100%. They kind of left it open till the very end. And for all we know, they could have had a different ending and decided in editing, let's use this one.
And I really like, that's, as a film critic, that's probably one of my biggest pet peeves, is films that have multiple different endings, that every time you feel like the movie is going to end, like it just kind of keeps going. They find more ways to breathe out of it. If you remember back when we talked about First Omen a few weeks ago, that was my biggest complaint about that movie, was the fact that they just had this like facade of endings that just kind of kept going and kept going and kept going. And this is exactly what this film felt like. Is it just kind of felt like it should have ended one way, and it just kind of found a way to just kind of keep breathing more life into the screen.
Yeah. It didn't really breathe more life into the screen. It just kind of made it drag on to beat the last little bit of life it had out of it.
That's what I was going to say. It didn't help it. It dragged it. So it's like, okay, are we done yet? Okay, that's done. Great. No, what? It's still going? So yeah, it dragged.
I think overall this movie has a lot going for it. Like I said, the cinematography is gorgeous. The acting's really done. Even the writing, I think, is really great. I think a lot of the storytelling and the direction are the kind of things that I have the biggest problems with. But Mark, you kicked us off. What would you rate this movie?
2.
Billy?
I gave it a 3.
I'm going to go at 2.5. Meet you guys in the middle. So overall, we'll give this one a 2.5 out of 5. But that is going to do it for us this year on Salem Horror Fest. I think it's the first film festival we've covered this year, correct?
Yeah.
So,
I do think part of the cool thing with the Salem Horror Fest is if you look at the full lineup for in person, it had some cool movies too that we didn't get to cover. Like they had the original American Grudge. They had was it City of the Dead? I think it was.
Yeah.
Land of the Dead, something like that. They had some solid classic movies mixed in with the indie films. So it would be something that would be cool to check out in person one day, but
fingers crossed. Well,
yeah.
maybe we'll get out there. Who knows? But if you guys want to check out more information on Salem Horror Fest, go to salem-horror.com. We'll provide links in the show notes below. And Salem Horror Fest, what's cool about them is if you live up in Massachusetts or in that area, is that they are one of those types of film festivals that does stuff literally all year. Like this is kind of like their anchor event, but they do screenings literally all year. So make sure you guys check them out if you guys are in the area. Where can people find you online, Billy?
Actually, I signed up for Letterboxd. It's VA Boy 99. So VA like Virginia, Boy 99, and you can find me there. I'll try to do better than what Mark does with his.
Yeah, because I update mine yearly.
I think I remember having a conversation with you when we first became friends, and I was like, every time we would podcast together, I'd be like, yeah, you guys can find me on Letterboxd. And you got done, you're like, should I get a Letterboxd? And I was like, yes. And I think you were like really active with it for like 2 months, and then you just kind of gave up. You're just like, it'll happen. It'll be around. It's fine.
One day.
Where can we find you where you are active?
Painting miniatures on Instagram. Titanium Juggernaut Painting. Where I've actually posted stuff recently. Ta-ta.
Ta-ta. You guys can find me. I am also on Letterboxd. It's Captain Nostalgia. I update that thing religiously. So, yeah, catch me over there. And you guys can follow us wherever you guys get your podcasts from. Abyss Gazing, just search it. And you guys can also find us wherever. You guys can follow our parent company wherever you get your podcasts from as well. Search Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, and Patreon, and wherever you guys get your podcasts from. Until next time, remember, the longer you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back into you.